Well, it's nearly summer, and that means that a lot of you will be going off on holiday. And of course, that leads to worries these days about data and your phone. Nobody wants to be stuck with an enormous bill once they get back. And our sponsors, NordVPN, have got a product that might help you. It's called Saily. It's an affordable eSIM data for international travel. You get a data plan from the Saily eSIM app and go online wherever you are. So you can say goodbye to patchy Wi-Fi and high roaming fees. You'll save a lot of money, which is obviously good, but it's also safe and secure internet. There's no more dodgy public Wi-Fi when you're abroad. There's built-in cybersecurity features as well, web protection, ad blocker, and instant access on your arrival. So to go there without any worries and be in contact with whoever you need to be, hopefully see some Rangers signings in the summer, then get this. And you can do so if you download Saily in your app store or by scanning the QR code on screen. Use code Heart and Hand at checkout to get 15% off your first purchase. The details are in the podcast episode description box. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar, and as always, I am your host. The great Walter Smith once said that Rangers are never more than 3 games from a crisis. Well, 3 games into the season, if it isn't a crisis, it certainly feels a lot like one. Joining me to discuss the match against Hibs and look ahead to Thursday's crucial tie with Jagiellonia in the return leg of the Europa League qualifier is David Graham. Hello, Davey.
Good afternoon, Davey. Good afternoon, listeners. I don't know the French for it, but the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yes. Probably les fuck's sake. Would that be a French thing to describe it?
Well, it can't be fuck's sake to have anymore, so...
No, it's just somebody else. But there's plenty of options. And look, right at the start, Rangers were a bit better yesterday. They weren't great, but they were better. Okay, I'm not saying that. I thought I was actually quite angry on Thursday. I thought we were really bad, but that was better. However, it's a results-based industry. Rangers didn't get it again, and not only didn't get the win, but somehow contrived to end up losing a game. And I think that's the biggest complaint I have at the moment, is that this team, not only does it not find ways to win, it finds ways to lose. And look, it's only 3 games in, and people saying Derek McInnes is just in the door are absolutely correct. But he said it himself yesterday. He understands this is not about these 3 games on their own. This is 15 years of frustration. And unfortunately, they're there. You cannot dismiss them and claim it isn't there, because they are.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think we'll pick the bones out of it. There is no one obvious person or people, or there's a collective issue or issues. I mean, the chairman, as early as this morning, has talked about the culture and standards and all the various buzzwords. There is no magic bullet. Ultimately, where I would say, just to kind of kick the conversation off, is I asked the question, I think last night in our group, which was how many of the current squad even get into the 55 or Seville squad, never mind start. And I think we kind of all agreed you're clutching at straws. So ultimately, you're right about the 15 years, Davey, but what you also have to recognise, we have progressively declined pretty much, and I'm not getting into rewriting history, but pretty much since Gio left, I think it's probably fair to say, and we haven't stopped the bleed. I think that's the big problem.
No, we haven't. It is too early to tell if we have yet, right, in this season, and there is still plenty of opportunity to do so. Let's be honest; it's not an impossible thing to do, but there is this frustration among Rangers fans, because it's understandable. You're always waiting for something to kick in and be better, and then so far we haven't really seen much evidence of it. The game itself yesterday, David, I do want to put up front an absolutely disgraceful VAR decision to kick things off. I'm going to get on my high horse here. I'll just bring Dobbin out because a couple of things about this that really pissed me off, something chronic. First of all, the spectacle aspect, before we even get to the decision, there were 50,000 people at that game yesterday who'd paid a lot of money to be there. It's not cheap to attend football matches, that had decided that they were going to go and support their teams on a Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon, rather than sit in the house and watch it. And they got a worse service than people who were just sitting in a house watching it. That cannot be right. That cannot be right. Nobody in the ground knew what was going on. Then up flashes, or there's a VAR decision checking possible penalty. Nobody knew for which side we're checking a possible penalty because nobody had seen anything. The ref runs to monitor, he points to the spot at our end, and it's a penalty to Hibs. Nobody knows what has happened yet. Nothing's been told to us. There's just been this invisible penalty. I look at the big screens, I'm waiting to see the replay, none comes. That can't be right. I can't think of any industry in which they do not make the interests of the paying customer the most important.
Well, look, and again, I reiterate everything you're saying. I don't want to get on the, the Bears from Ulster are more loyal than anyone else. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is, myself and my young lad went across to Ballistock Wednesday, Thursday, back late Friday night to be served up, a UEFA standard refereeing performance, which I think we've got used to over the years. I know so many guys who went across either on the bus or the boat or the flight for that game yesterday. And you're right, you're barely in your seat. They got to half an hour and everyone's looking around going, what the hell is going on? And I think
you need to get on your phone. You need to text people at home and say, what has happened?
The worst of it was, Davey, I was trying to keep the guys keep you up to date in the WhatsApp group. I don't think anyone knew, even Michael Stewart, who, let's be honest, he's no supporter or friend of ours, turned around and no one actually understood. It was such a 50-50. You could have argued both. I just can't get my head around it. And I think the issue that we've got, and this is the real big pressing, see, when it comes to the culture, in my view, that culture is so ingrained now, and it's almost where too many of us accept that it's almost part of being a Rangers fan, and we can't accept that. It's just not. It's not acceptable.
That's a problem. That's a problem. It is, and they spoke about it today at the AGM / shareholders meeting. But the decisions that we get are constantly awful. I've spoken about it before, and I've said the same thing, which is that if you get referees, yesterday it was Matthew McDermott and Don Robertson, but 3 referees sat and looked at that. I think it's pretty telling, by the way, that they don't want these decisions replayed in the ground. Right? Why not? You've access to it.
Yeah, I think, Davey, the big question I've got is why in the World Cup, why in the Premier League is, the referee's decision broadcast across the whole stadium on speakers, but we basically live off the scraps. And it's almost that thing of there's a perception that fans, particularly Rangers fans, are treated with disdain by the football authorities. But the difficulty is that when perception becomes reality, it actually shows that our stance has been vindicated. And the big problem is, ultimately now, another season, you've got our current manager who has a ban hanging over his head because he described a decision last year as being disgusting. Yesterday was equally as disgusting. Like, at what point are you no longer allowed to provide your opinion? Because as far as I'm concerned... Yeah. Might as well be in North Korea.
Yeah, with it being, it's not just us. I mean, Michael Stewart can't get into Hampden because he criticised the refereeing, and as you say, no friend of ours, not somebody I have much time for. But that's their approach to criticism. They never ever deal with the point of the criticism. They attack the critic. They always play the man and not the ball. So it's rather than saying, what, our refereeing standards are in the toilet. One of the arguments that they put forward a lot is they say, well, a striker misses a chance, he doesn't get the same vitriol from his supporters as a refs get. Well, one, yes, they do. Anybody at Rangers will tell you that if they make a fuck up, they get it. And secondly, yeah, but they might get dropped or sold, right? Matthew McDermott makes these decisions week in, week out, and then he still gets the games. So I think there is a lot of frustration. We were told, particularly this summer, we don't want VAR re-reffing games. Right, that we don't want them looking over things with a microscope, looking for things. It's clear and obvious. That if nobody in the ground, including the Hibs players, know what you're talking about, it ain't clear and obvious.
You see, the issue here, David, and look, I know I sort of use the example of the oval ball now and again when it comes to the video refereeing. Where video refereeing is very interesting and actually quite useful in terms of a player safety point of view in rugby is where if there's an off the ball incident that has endangered an opponent, either it can be reviewed as in if you're yellow carded and you're off for 10 minutes, it can be reviewed. Therefore, it can be upgraded to a red, or you can be cited, which essentially is down the line during the week, you're basically brought up in front of a panel and pretty much asked, give us your version of events. You can be banned for weeks to months. Now, the difficulty we've got here is that's different because that's looking at player safety. It's looking at the long-term sort of health of that particular game. Where we've got here is you've got people who are making issues where issues aren't. That's the big problem we've got here. So this wasn't a penalty in normal circumstances because it wasn't clear and it wasn't obvious. So therefore, this is not a clear and obvious error. And this is what I don't understand is why the SFA are intent on creating issues and creating noise. And actually, it leads me to conclude, David, they're doing it deliberately. They're almost doing it to troll us at this stage.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. You would think that after last season that they would have been told, here, sensible. But they're either incapable of it or they're just so bad. I keep coming back to this. Major tournaments come and go, no Scottish refs. There's a reason for this. FIFA and UEFA look at them and go, no fucking danger. Are we having one of these idiots come into one of our tournaments? And that should be, but again, they circle the wagons. And, they spoke about it at the AGM. Marathi in particular was very annoyed about the standard of refereeing. Rangers say they speak with him, but it doesn't seem to make any difference. And you can understand the fans' frustration because if we keep putting up with it and we keep getting it.
Well, look, the last thing I'll say in the matter, David, and I can speak from experience, it is incredibly frustrating where, after so many games, in fact, most of them seem to involve Colum or Clancy, you were having discussions internally. There was conversations being had between, directors and the likes of, and I can't remember his name now, used to be head of refereeing, Crawford Allen, was it?
Yeah,
and there was there was a decent level of engagement, and there was but ultimately it didn't change things. That was the problem. Like people being open to engagement is like fine. You can have an open door policy in any office, but oh yeah, come on in, tell me what you think. All right, thanks for telling me that. We're not going to make any changes. You may as well just shut the door in our face. So I think the big difficulty is, and I have a strong degree of sympathy for the likes of Prague Marathi, Andrew Kavanagh, and especially Jim Gillespie, because all you can do is try to continually frustrate the system and try to change it. But culturally, and I think I've quoted this before, like David Holmes, I was born in 1986, and David Holmes was talking about similar issues in terms of the football authorities, in terms of the media 40 years ago that we're still facing now. But it doesn't mean that we should give up either.
No, absolutely not. Rangers need to be better. Not one person is saying that, but it doesn't help when in a lot of games you're facing these huge game-changing decisions, which that was, changed the whole atmosphere. Where I was a little disappointed, Davey, was the anger in the stadium was not at the Rangers players, and there had been a really good atmosphere up to that point. The Rangers players didn't then convert that anger into an energy. And the manager said afterwards they were a bit too safe in their passing. Devlin and Raskin, I think, maybe too similar to play together. And I get why he played them. I think after, midweek in Bialystok, where they kept breaking into spaces where a Rangers midfield should be but wasn't visible, he thought, I'm going to plug that gap. And those two did that, right? They're good at that. But we were way too safe, way too many easy passes, way too many passes between the centre-backs and the centre midfielders. It doesn't get anywhere. And look, nobody's saying just sit and hit Hollywood balls all the time, but we've got to get a better balance in that because it does frustrate the fans when we see this. If you continually take the safe option, then I think that has as negative effect on the fans as if you were, playing the passes incorrectly, because we can see it's not leading to anything. Hibs are quite happy. Other teams are quite happy. They'll sit in their shape. I do understand that sometimes as a fan, I get a wee bit overexcited. I'm getting in the box when they need to play that extra pass. I get it, right? It's a technical thing. But not as often as we do it. and not when you can't claim to be, well, we're probing looking for a gap, which is what possession football is about, if it's your two centre-halves and your two centre midfielders that are passing it between themselves, because that's 50 yards from where a gap might be.
Look, I agree with everything you say, and I think what I would say as well, like it's a cliche, but finding the key to unlock the defence and one thing or another. Like for me, like Derek McInnes did to us what Hibs did on us yesterday. He did that for years, and I think that the frustration is that obviously when you're setting a team up, you've got to, against us at home, you've got to try to stop anyone creative, stop passes, positive passes going forward, passes trying to break the line. Someone like a Joe Rebo is good at it, Stephen Davis, Yanis Hadji, people like that. I think the issue that we've got at the moment is we are setting a team up. Like I almost look at that team yesterday, like I'm sure we'll discuss the right back in a second, but you're almost looking at the team yesterday saying, like, that's kind of almost, if we went to like an old firm at Parkhead with that team, you'd be like, right, okay, you can kind of see what the plan. And the real frustrating thing I had a couple of times, like Finlay Curtis was definitely trying his best in the first half, positive down the left hand side. Romans was trying his best. But like there were several times, if you were to put a heat map on Chermeti, he was hanging around, he could have lent on the corner flag. And there was times where Finlay Curtis had the ball on left hand side, almost on the edge of the box. And I kind of looked at him, there was barely any blue shirts in the box. Now, I'm not saying old school, get it in the mixer, lads. But what I'm saying is, the more bodies you've got in the box, the more chance you have of, getting a scrap and getting a half chance. And it just feels, as you say, I don't want to say it's negative, but you're right. I think it's too safe, especially at home. And I would rather have a lower percentage of possession, but being more positive with it than running around, and I don't know what the possession stat was yesterday, but running around with 70, 80, 90%.
76.
Yeah, right, 76, right? So it wasn't far off, right? So you're sitting at 76% of the ball, but I'd rather sit at 66. I'd rather sit at 56 if actually we're doing positive things with it and we're winning the bloody football match,
Yeah, that's the thing. And again, I totally agree with you with numbers in the box. You're not going to get anywhere with that. I think what happens is when the game's been played there, the forwards get frustrated and they come out looking for a touch. And I get that's a natural thing to do as a footballer. But you need them in the box. But of course, you have to be getting the service to them. Up front hasn't worked for us so far this season in the various combinations we've tried. Shankland hasn't arrived as a player yet. He just hasn't. And Chermeti hasn't been at the form we've seen at the tail end of last season. Hopefully his injury isn't too bad. But we haven't quite found that balance yet, have we?
No, and I think that the problem as well is, and again, look, we're going to get into the weeds of recruitment. I suppose the big challenge is, we brought people like Shankland, Devlin to an extent, Ross McCrory, probably for games like yesterday where you're saying, right, you're playing at home, start of the season, are these boys going to start week in, week out? No, probably not, but will they be able to, influence the game positively over the season? Yes, hopefully, probably will. They've all got a track record. But the difficulty is, we've made Lawrence Shankland the captain. Cammy Devlin seems to have, pretty much, I wouldn't say nailed himself on as a starter, but he seems to be playing a lot more than other centre midfielders, particularly our Serbian friend who found himself a right back. That just feels, it doesn't feel at the moment when you look at the squad that there's a collective plan. It almost just feels like a kind of a mismatch of players just kind of all thrown in together and let's see if we can make it work. It just doesn't seem, this is a cliche and I hate using these words, what's the actual identity? Do you know what I mean? And I think that was even the challenge under Danny Roll as well. When Stephen Gerrard was here, when Gio was here, like me and criticise Gio all you want in terms of style of play, but you knew what Gio was trying to do. And I think that's where we're lacking now, is actually what is our identity and what are we trying to actually achieve here?
No, I think that's fair. And in the first half, we did struggle to break them down. Second half, again, the manager did change it up a little and we were better. We were dominant and we had a lot of chances on another day, etc. But it wasn't that day. And I must admit, I was starting to feel like we are never going to score here. He brought Nadiri on and one thing Nadiri did was he won ball in those areas you were speaking about. It's not subtle, but at least if you're getting a forward who's getting to the ball ahead of the defender, and putting second balls in difficult areas, that was causing an issue. One of the issues that I've got at the moment, David, is that against Dundee United, second half, Asgard looked dangerous, but he was the only one. Against Jagiellonia, Curtis came on and looked dangerous, but he was the only one. Yesterday, Yokota was looking dangerous, but again, in isolation. And when he went off, Gassama came on and looked dangerous. But you can't have just one guy, because the opposition can deal with that less with less difficulty than they can deal with two or three. And I think it was noticeable that by the second half, for example, Hibs had 2, sometimes 3 on Yokota because they realised he's their danger man. We need guys stepping up in tandem, not these individual bursts.
Yeah, there was once, I think, in the first half where Yokota made a nice break, and like again, okay, Draganovic isn't a right back, but you were literally screaming, "Where's the right back?" Now I don't want to say, "Oh yeah, Tav would have been," but even Ross McCrory, whoever, a natural right back would have been bombing down the wing and overlapping to try to get the ball in, and there was just none of that. And I think, do you know, actually, and this is the thing that kind of frustrates me at this stage. I actually went to watch Glentoran under-16s play like a West Ham select. So it's essentially a group of players who are in a West Ham sub-academy for Northern Ireland before our game. So watch it in it was a half-on kickoff. And it was a typical almost trial team where you could see there was plenty of quality, fits and starts, but the players had never really played together, and they were all kind of maybe trying to do a little bit too much at times individually to kind of impress scouts. That's almost how we appear so far this season. We're like, again, go back to Thursday night, and Finlay Curtis come on, did really well. Raskin come on, did really well. But then, as you say too, you're looking round, and like, Asgard's had, an absolute disaster with this, I don't know, inside flick, what he was trying to do. And like Fernandez, for example, like Fernandez's body language, and I think any Bears that were there yesterday, any Bears who've watched us in person this season will know Fernandez's body language and Tremelli's body language is a disgrace. And maybe it's just sometimes the way they wander around. Maybe it's just the way they walk. You can't, whatever. But it just feels to me that it's so lax. And I think I keep talking about culture and keep talking about standards. Like, ultimately, if you can't change the man, you change the man. And I think, clearly at the moment, it appears to me, no evidence in this. I haven't spoken to Derek McInnes about it. I haven't spoken to anybody in the club about it. But it appears to me that McInnes is probably just teetering in the edge in terms of his current, contentment around the squad. And what I mean by that is, again, I go back. What's the actual plan? Like, where's John Suter? What's going on there? Where's Connor Barron? What's going on there? I just can't work any of it out,
Yeah, I would agree on Fernandez. I think that so far this season he's been really bad. And he doesn't help himself, because there are instances, the second goal yesterday, where he's jogging when he should be sprinting. And I don't know if maybe all the praise he got, all the chat about clubs from top 5 leagues has turned his head a little, but at the moment he's not playing well. And you can't do anything if your defence isn't solid. I'd give Chermiti, I'd probably disagree with you slightly on Chermiti. I think with him, he's working hard enough. There's just been no quality so far from him. But yeah, look, I think that at the end of the day, Derek McInnes knows he needs certain types of players and more in certain areas. And it's interesting to me that today Rangers linked with a right back, because it has been an issue. I mean, yesterday he starts Dragojevic there and then puts Finlay Curtis in there rather than Ross McCrory, who, to be fair, has looked pretty poor in his performances so far. Sterling, as we know, you can't rely on him, and he can't play 3 games in a week. So I think Rangers, McInnes is just going, no, I can't be putting up with that, and he's going out and trying to get players in. I do think at the moment there is an element with Derek McInnes, you're right, of having to whittle with what God gave him. And I think that he's having to, someone said to me yesterday, it's like chucking stuff against the wall and hoping something sticks. I says, it's exactly that. He's trying to find something within this group of players. But to be honest, that kind of speaks to your point about, well, they're not being recruited for a plan then, are they? If the manager's gone, right, I need to mix and match. That if you need to mix and match ingredients, it's because you've got random ingredients.
Well, look, I think the right back for me epitomises where we're at the moment in terms of our recruitment and our planning. Like, James Tavernier, we knew was going from April. In fact, we probably knew he probably stayed a year too long, right? That's not good. There's podcasts and James not here, but let's be honest. Tav leaving wasn't a surprise. So what I don't understand is the best we can come up with in literally months is one of Derek McInnes's former players, and yes, he's former player of Rangers, and yes, he ticks boxes. I'm sure he gets it like the rest of us do. But the difficulty is, if the best we can come up with is Ross McCrory, and now we're kicking around. As you said, everyone knows Dijon Sterling has no more in a game a week in him. His injury record is appalling. If Dijon Sterling could play 90% availability rating, he'd be nowhere near Rangers because he's a quality player, but he just can't get a run of games together. So it frustrates me that we are literally days away from the window in Jim White's words slamming shut, and it feels that we are. I'm going to go as
Oh,
far as say
what a bit away.
half a dozen away. We're half a dozen away in my view.
Well, the chairman did say today that he expects 3 to 5 more in before the end of the window, and we need it. But we also need a recognised way of playing, and we need to get guys in and playing minutes. And I think that what I've found peculiar about is we have a shitload of midfielders. We have a lot of midfielders, and that is going to lead to a temptation for any manager to change it when somebody doesn't have a good game. But if you've signed, for example, Dan Neil, he hasn't been impressive at all since he came in. But if you've signed him because he's the passer that we don't have, you need to play him.
Oh, yeah,
you've signed
absolutely.
Dragicevic for a lot of money. You need to play him and not at right back. So I think all of those things are adding in to the general level of frustration. Now, at the shareholders meeting, Andrew Kavanagh said it's no one person who signs. People get on at the recruitment team, but they don't have authority to sign players. And he kind of took the responsibility on himself. He said it's we as a club who sign players, not one individual. I would always say, by the way, that the responsibility is the chairman's because he signs the checks. So I would always say that the final responsibility is with him. But you can understand fans' frustrations, surely, when a number of players are coming in and then the team still looks this sort of fractured, fragmented thing.
I think what I'm going to say, David, and it's not, it's the chairman's ultimate decision because he is the chairman, right? He signs the checks. But what I would also say, David, is you've got to bear in mind too, the chairman has allowed people to be put into positions of power and authority. So whether he's decided, Jim Gillespie's the CEO, he runs the club, he runs the business on a day-to-day basis. Jim Gillespie then in turn, I noticed the other day online, we're appointing more technical scouts for various parts throughout the world, or throughout Europe at least. I suppose the question I'm going back to is, it stops with Andrew Kavanagh because he signs the checks, but it also stops with Andrew Kavanagh because he has put people into positions that he has made the decision that they are the best,
Yeah.
the best of best in class.
Ultimately, you're the decision maker. You have to take the responsibility for the decisions of those under you. And sometimes I'm sure that's frustrating, but that's the job.
Yeah, I think that the wider difficulty that we've got is, I think, we need we need to get behind Derek McInnes. I think that's quite an obvious thing to say, but I think we need to recognise the market we're operating in. I think we need to recognise, the culture that we're trying to change. I think our big frustration is at the moment is we probably hoped, given the first couple of fixtures, that we would be able to build a bit of momentum. I think really what we've got to do is sort of circle the wagon's a great thing. The next game is the biggest game, and I think like Thursday night is massive for us because we have to build momentum there. Obviously, you have the League Cup, and I think that ultimately, really, David and I always say, and actually, Derek McInnes, I think Martin and you alluded to it a week or two ago. The Old Firm being later this year probably actually suits because it gives it a little bit more breathing space. Ultimately, David, bring me on the Flagship the day after the Old Firm. Only really then can we start to provide a kind of clear analysis of McInnes's start. And the reason I say that is because then let's see who comes in the door, let's see how we're trying to play, and let's see if we're starting to go in the right direction. Because I feel at the minute, and I don't want to sound negative, just being realistic, I feel at the moment we can't really say what McInnes is trying to do because, as you say yourself, the last couple of games he's made subs at half time, which is probably recognition that either he's got it wrong or the players aren't up to scratch. But as you say, we're going to have to start sticking with players. Dragijanovic and Dan Neil are probably the two that would stand out in my mind to say they're the sort of midfielders you want to be trying to build things round, especially if, fingers crossed, we get Nico Raskin out for a big sum of money,
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We can talk about the likes of Suter or Barron, but we haven't been successful with those players. That's why we're buying new players. But if you only give them, and I get it, he's trying to win games. He hasn't won yet. Thursday is so crucial. Sunday is so crucial, right, for Derek McInnes' long-term future. Because I think, because he's had buy-in from a lot of fans, not all, but buy-in from a lot of fans, that he's getting more time than maybe other people would do. But at some point, everyone's got a, here, what is happening? And these two matches, Europa League and League Cup, are enormous. We've got to start winning games of football by hook or by crook. But I mentioned this actually on another show, and I was surprised by the response it got in terms of people agreeing, which is, surely at some point, this Rangers team, any Rangers team, has to play well. Even when we win matches last season, very rarely did you think I enjoyed that. We were really good. And it can't be that impossible. Other teams, even poor teams, manage it occasionally. And everything seems to be a slog.
The big difficulty and the frustration that I have had is it's the manner. Back to maybe Thursday night because I was there. I wasn't there yesterday. You can probably go a little bit more to yesterday because you were there and vice versa. It's just the manner of things, it just feels that we're not asking for Messi and Ronaldo, but what we are asking for is just a bit of fight and a bit of grit. And you know what? Beyond that, we're asking for a bit of quality, and I think that's the real problem at the minute, David. Is it just feels that there's not enough heart, there's not enough fight. And the bigger difficulty is there's not enough quality at the moment. And when you've neither of those things, you're going to struggle to win football matches.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's talk, obviously, Yokota's come in, looks quite good. Duriyesh, talk of him coming in. Rangers need to get these guys into the team. But as I say, you almost have a settled lineup and a settled system. And, Asgard, for instance, is one, he's popped in and out of the side so far this season. But if you play him, you need to play a certain different type of way. I think it's clear that Derek McInnes would favour a 4-4-2. I think he signed players for that. I would just hope that he would just go, right, this is the team, right, for the next few weeks. And I'm going to play these guys. And, I might have to sub some if they're not playing well or whatever, but I'm going to give them a chance to settle in, get to know each other, and really learn about each other and whatnot. Because otherwise you're going to end, the word I keep coming back to is fragmented. Otherwise you're going to keep coming back to that. And I don't think that that's a long-term recipe for success, to be honest.
No, it's not. No, I agree. I mean, I think that's the difficulty that we're facing at the minute is to say, ultimately the goalkeeper picks himself. But beyond that, you can put an argument up for virtually every other position on the pitch. No one stuck their hand up and say, I own this position. Maybe Finlay Curtis, because at least you got a bit of guile and a bit of positivity. But beyond that,
no, exactly. And positivity is the thing. That's the key word. But again, I mentioned this on our shows. I really fundamentally believe it. I'm fed up hearing things like, Ibrox, it's not going well, it's a tough place to play in the environment and this and that, right? That's what it is. Yeah, 15 years, it is, it's true, it's there, right? Deal with it. And now it's up to the players to lift the fans, not the other way around, right? The fans have done their bit. They did their bit again at the weekend. Brilliant tifo from the Union Bears, brilliant atmosphere in the ground, and the players then lose the match, right? It's now up to go out there and play well. You're all highly paid, well rewarded guys. Go out there and play well and excite the fans and get them up because fans are desperate to cheer, but you need to give us a reason to.
Yeah, one thing I'd say just to start off is, listen, money's hard earned, and it's no one's wrong in it. But in the same sentence, if anyone's got a spare quid or a spare fiver or tenner, donating it to the UBs. They did a fantastic amount of work, all voluntary, all, week in, week out. Those tifos and displays are phenomenal, and I think we should try to support them. And what I would say is, and obviously, defending Rangers fans, hardly big news, but like I said to you, I think literally this time last year, David, like after being embarrassed by Bruges in the first 20 odd minutes, we stuck with the team. We have stuck with the team. Like, okay, right, we had the kind of, Russell Martin had to get the escort out of Falkirk that day, but like we were right on the precipice in terms of frustration. Like, we have backed the team. Like, this idea of Ibrox groaning, like I think I said on the group yesterday, I said I'm sick to death of people saying, oh, the expectation at Rangers, like as if wanting to win football matches is a crime. Like, ultimately, if you go to support a team, you want that team to win. And our difficulty is, it is not, in my view, beyond a fair expectation that when you go to watch Rangers at Ibrox, regardless of who you play, even in the Champions League, you should be expecting to win that game. And I think that's the real frustration, is if players are either mentally or physically too soft, well, why are we signing them? That's the issue we've got us, and that comes right back to recruitment. Like, if we are bringing boys in and saying, oh, I don't really know, it's like the time that I remember Bomber Brown saying about Dalcio. He says Dalcio was in the pitch for about 10 minutes at Ibrox, and he didn't track back, and he says he'll never do here. And I just don't understand how we are bringing boys in on big money, who then will say, oh, expectation, pressure. Well, get used to it. You're professional football, and you're paid a hell of a lot of money to do so.
Yeah, I'm the same, and I'm at the stage now where I think, you need to give us something. Do you know what I mean? I think everybody's played their part. I think now it's you need to excite us. You need to get us off our seats. You need to be playing good stuff, working hard. Not walking when you should be sprinting. All of that stuff, and show us that level of commitment that we have given to you. That's where I am anyway. Right then, folks, that will do us for this week here on Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. Give a shout out to our sponsors, Saley, and our sponsors, the Rangers Youth Development Co. And I'd also like to thank our producers, Mike Lee and Paul Miles. And my thanks to my guest today, David Graham. Davey, thank you very much for that. Enjoyed the chat.
Davey, always a pleasure, regardless of the circumstances. I want to give a shout out to whoever the Rangers fan was that I saw in Londonderry on Saturday. He shouted, Davey, and he clearly knew I didn't recognise him, and he just shouted, Heart and Hand. So I thought, right, however you were.
Thank you very much for listening, folks. We'll be back next week. Until then, take care.